Hello, welcome back to Raising Arrows Mama. Today I thought we would continue the series on Charlotte Mason's three knowledges: knowledge of God, knowledge of man, and knowledge of universe. We've already done the knowledge of God, so if you missed that, go back and check out those videos. Today we're going to go through the knowledge of man and talk about the various subjects that make up a Charlotte Mason curriculum. I will try to sandwich these with some peeks at what we're doing for this specific category in our homeschool on other days if I'm able to. As you can see, my shelves are empty right now. We are moving back into our house after having some extensive renovations. Sorry, I also don't have my tripod with me. And so I don't have all my things. But you know what I do have? I did not pack up my Charlotte Mason volumes because I knew I wanted them, because I need them. I just do. They're such great reference sources. If you are a Charlotte Mason homeschooler or you're interested in Charlotte Mason homeschooling, there are so many great blogs, so many great videos like this. Not that mine are great, but there's a lot of great videos on YouTube. And there are just so many other voices that are sharing Charlotte Mason's wisdom, but you can't get better than her actual voice. I highly recommend you start with volume 1. That is amazing. I actually have only read volume 6 in snippets, and I am working on reading it in order. But as I do so, I am sharing different sections through here as we go through the knowledges. And today we're going to talk about the knowledge of man. The first category she lists is history. And honestly, I could just read you that whole chapter. It's about 6 pages and it goes into great detail, and I encourage you, go check it out. It starts in volume 6, which you can access for free on Ambleside Online's website. Go to Charlotte Mason series on their little drop-down menu. Go to volume 6, and it starts on page 169 to talk about history. It is a phenomenal, succinct chapter with so much wisdom. So I am going to share some snippets with you today about it. But first, I thought I would give you my very quick, very concise oral narration of what I read. So in volume 6, in that chapter on knowledge of man, talking about history, we learn that history is critical. It is critical to creating the character of a child. And more importantly, she talks about patriotism. And if you remember, volume 6 was written after World War II. So about 1922, I believe, is when it was published. And so she is taking what she saw in the crux of all of that and applying it to education and what lacked or what went well and what she thinks helps to make the character of a man, to make the character of a child. And history is first and foremost in that development. And so she talks quite a bit about patriotism. She talks about it in a few other books as well. But in this particular chapter, she's saying that history is one of the ways we can develop patriotism. And not necessarily, because remember, God comes first. She tells us that in the previous chapter on knowledge of God, but she is telling us that patriotism is important, that it helps develop character, and we want our children to be proud of where they're from, and not in a proud I'm better than you, but in a proud of I am grateful for where I am and for the people who came before me. And so she talks more about all of that kind of in conjunction with going through a very quick, succinct outline of how to do history in a Charlotte Mason method. And she drops some book names, which you might recognize, and some that you probably will never read. More on that later. But she goes through each form and she delineates how you should go about teaching history and how in those first years you're going to start with those ancient tales. You're going to talk about, for her, Britain. And then as they grow, once they get to about form 2, then you're going to start bringing in a neighboring country, which for them is France. And then also ancient history, you're going to touch on that. And then as they develop and get closer to high school ages in forms 4 and 5, you're going to start adding in current events and tying their history into all their other subjects. Whereas before we're not building it all together. It was just, this is the history section, here's what we study. All the while we are doing it chronologically in order, and if we come to the end, which she said was 1920, then, whoops, somebody's waking up. If we come to the end, we just start back around. And you will learn it at a different level the next time around. And so as you come back around, you'll just start and then at the beginning again. And that is exactly what we do. And so, as I said, she drops a lot of books, titles, namely Our Island Story, which is still used by many today. We have used it and actually really loved it. But more on book topics in another video. And so I want to read to you now some of her quotes and things from this particular chapter. And the very first one comes from the very opening paragraph. I love it. It says that this is Montaigne that she is quoting, that the teacher shall by the help of histories inform himself of the worthiest minds that were in the best ages. So we're looking for the worthiest minds in the best ages. We're not going to try to tackle every single person and every single thing. I'm getting ready to do 20th century history with my kids, and I needed this quote to remind me that I don't have to do every single thing. Choose what is worthy. Unfortunately, there's a lot that are worthy, but pray and find the ones that you can do. And then she goes on to say, though, to us in particular who are living in one of the great epochs of history, this was 100 years ago, mind you, it is necessary to know something of what has gone before in order to think justly of what is occurring today. 100 years ago, and she's saying, they're living in the greatest time and they need to know what happened before in order to really understand what's going to happen today and tomorrow. And that's exactly how many people feel today. So we go on, and she tells us how young people love history, how they really, really do enjoy it, and how it's, And she goes on to say, it is not too much to say that a rational, well-considered patriotism depends on a pretty copious reading of history. If we wanted children to develop patriotism to be good citizens of their nation and of the world, then they kind of need to know where they're coming from. And stories are the way to do it. And then she goes on this. Now, the method I am advocating has this advantage. It multiplies time. Because she's telling us that in history classes around the world, that's what teachers say. I never have enough time. I don't have enough time. And she's like, I've unlocked it. I've got the key for you guys. I have made time multiply for you so that you can get through all of it. And how's she going to do that? Through stories, through the right books. We know that young people are enormously interested in the subject and give concentrated attention if we give them the right books. So it comes down to choosing the right books. And as a parent who's been using Charlotte Mason methods for 8 years, I cannot agree more. Books that my children are interested in, when I choose right, there is no stopping them. I can't make them uninterested. I'll go into that another time, but really choose the right books and just watch them come alive. And even when you think they're like complaining, they don't want to narrate, well, no, I don't know what happened. Or they give you one sentence, it comes out later. It comes out when they're talking to their father 2 years later when their sister is going through it again. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember this and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, you didn't even give me that good a narration the first time around. It's amazing. It gets in there. Choose the right books, which is hard to do and it takes work, but you can do it, mama. Then she goes on to say, which is the biggest part of this is how you do it. It is, she walks through her method. So you're going to choose the right books. Then it is our part to see that every child knows and can tell, whether by way of oral narrative or written essay. So you may know the Karen Glass book, Know and Tell, and that's where she gets it from right there. And so we're going to choose the right books, and then we're going to have our kids narrate. We're going to have them read it and tell us what happened. And there are different ways you can do narration. I touch on that in another video. But honestly, it comes down to they read it and they tell you. And she goes on to say her other little tips of how to do it, which is one, reading. And she talks about how the power of attention really isn't a hard thing. It is just a skill we've forgotten a lot of times. And so once we master it, it takes no effort. Once your child masters the skill, which trust me, I know, getting that to that mastery of attention is tricky. But once they get it, they do it without even realizing. It's second nature. And then she starts breaking it down by age. And so she starts with the child of age 6, and they're going to read stories of English history, and she says that it's a quantity of consecutive readings, 40 pages in a term, well written, well considered, that is also well illustrated. So your 6-year-old is not going to be reading it themselves. You're going to give them kind of a compendium of history of England. Here's where I differ. I live in America, so I'm going to use American history, because in one of her other texts, she specifically outlines that you should start with your home country. So if you, like me, are an American, it probably isn't the best thing to start with British history. Excuse me. But you do you. If you're raising your kid as a missionary in India and you're going to be there more than a year, perhaps Indian history is where you need to start. And in that case, I don't know, maybe you do need to start with British history. Not really, because India has such a long history before England came. What I'm saying is you start with your home country. And then she goes on to say, as they move up into 7, so you're going to go on and continue with your home country's history. For her, it's England. She gives some specific talks about what to do with that. And she continues to kind of encourage you in the method, which is not interrupting your child while they're narrating. And maybe if you're in a group setting, letting the children correct, not you correcting them. I really love this little caveat. The teacher's own real difficult part, the thing that you're really going to struggle with a teacher, is to keep up sympathetic interest by look and occasional word, by remarks upon a passage that has been narrated, by occasionally showing pictures, and so on. So your job is not to teach them everything, but your job is going to stay interested in what they're doing, to have things like the captain idea, to talk about it beforehand, to show them pictures. And we live in a day where with the internet, you can show them all kinds of things that she couldn't show them, and give them maybe even videos of certain things. So she goes on with those little tips. And then she, let's see here, to age 7, Form 1A. And she says, you're going to start with our island story, which is a great book. And I really do think it is great for 7-year-olds. However, it's not my country's history. So I don't know that that's necessarily where you would start. But like I said, I'll share about how I do it later, because I don't follow these rules all the way. But you're going to choose history and amplified and illustrated by short biographies of persons connected with the period of time. And she gives some different examples. And so biography is a great way to kind of add in those things. So you don't want necessarily a long biography at that age. You are going to want just little snippets of things. And Our Island Story does a great job of that. This Country of Ours, which is also by H.E. Marshall, does a great job of that. But there are also other books that do it as well. And then she goes on to say, as they get ready and they're going into Form 2, you're going to want to introduce a neighboring country, which for them is France. For us here in America, you could teach them about Canadian history or Spanish history, Mexican history. And I think that those have their place. Like I said, I can tell you about mine later because I diverged from this, but the other school of thought is that for us Americans, that you would learn British history starting in that next section, because we have so much of our history derived from Britain that to ignore all of British history is very, you're cutting out a lot of information that helped found our country as it is, which is why some people have Our Island Story at the same time as those introductory years. And then you're also going to begin to add in ancient history, which it says the study of ancient history, which cannot be contemporaneous, we approach through a chronological arranged book by the British Museum. So they had a book that one of their teachers had created based on the British Museum, and they just taught it in chronological order. It is just, there's no fancy thing that here's the book. We just go through it in order, chronologically. And so that's how they do ancient history starting in Form 2. Then in Form 3, she says that you're going to keep doing the English history, you're going to keep doing the French history, you're going to keep doing the British Museum of Books, and you're going to add on the Book of Centuries. And then she says a term from a little book on Indian history, a subject which interests them greatly. Slight studies of the history of other parts of the British Empire are included under geography. And so you're going to do other things that are connected to your country. In this day and age, really, that could be anything. And so you have to decide, is this going to be part of our geography studies or part of our history studies? Because by Form 3, it could go either way, depending on how in-depth you want to go and how in-depth the connection is to the country you're in. And then it says for history studies for Form 5 and 6, which is ages 15 to 18, are more advanced and more copious and depend for illustration upon readings in the literature of the period. And so not only are they going to continue their history readings, and she gives some examples of specific books, talking about, let's see here, whatever time period you're in, At that age, you're going to read about English history, you're going to read about French history, you're going to read about American history, and you're going to read your literature and other readings from that same time period, which will give you more of an insight, talking about kind of our historical fiction and our literature there. And so that's it. Then she goes on to talk a little bit about history charts, and she actually gives a very detailed on how Miss Beale of Cheltenham does it and how it's a grid structure. I'm going to pop a picture up here. We use these not well because I don't have my act all the way together, lest somebody think I do, but ours are all packed up at the moment. But these are from Leslie Manning, who is an Ambleside Online Charlotte Mason homeschool mom, and she makes some amazing resources. You can find these in her Teacher Pay Teacher store, and she also has other resources in Lulu that you can purchase, and they're phenomenal, and we actually use most of the things that she has in her shop. But this history chart is very helpful because you have a century and then you have grids for each year, and basically you're going to put like a little symbol in each year is how Charlotte Mason describes it. What we do is we write the event in there. You could do whatever you want. It's your history grid. And so her example here is that if you have draw cross battle axes, then that means there was a war that year. So you might do that. I don't know. Maybe you're going to draw a bayonet for the Civil War. Whatever you're going to do. I don't know. We're not the most amazing artists, so we write words in ours, and so we're like, okay, Prussian War or Civil War, or you can do other things besides war. Whatever the main event was, I think we did first car invented and things like that. We did Lewis and Clark made it to the Pacific, things like that we put on our history chart, something that is of importance to you. And it's just another way. You have your book of centuries, which gives you a 2-page spread for each century, but this is kind of like a highlight and a quick reference at the same time for each century. And it's just another way to notebook and understand and help your children see that kind of timeline aspect, because that's really what the goal is there. And then she goes on to talk about geographical aspects that you might do that might fall under history, and how there are certain things that are more geography and some are more history. It just kind of depends on what you're choosing. And then I really love this. She says, it will be observed that the work through the forms is always chronological and progressive. Don't forget that. You want to go in order. We don't want to be jumping here, there, and everywhere. I kind of think of how my Indiana history was, because you had like the first 3 years is all citizenship and social studies and no real history in Indiana. And then 4th grade is Indiana history. And then we did, what did we do for 5th grade? It was U.S. history. And then we were supposed to do ancient civ, but we didn't. We then had to do, in 6th grade, we were the year that they changed the lineup in Indiana. And we went to all of the Western Hemisphere. Very little on South America, though. And so we studied that year. And then we went to ancient civilizations. And I mean, it was just here, there, and everywhere. It was a very geographical kind of layout of how to study history rather than a chronological. And Charlotte Mason wants that chronological. She encourages you to do that because not only does it help, which way to go, because now you have a point of reference, but your child then knows how things happened in order, theoretically. The grids, the book of century, all of these things help your child to understand that. And then she just goes on to tell a little bit more about the importance of history and how it affects us. And I'm going to leave you with the last quote in that chapter, which is, we live in times critical for everybody, but eminently critical for teachers, because it rests with them to decide whether personal or general good should be aimed at, whether education shall be merely a means of getting on or a means of general progress towards high thinking and plain living, and therefore an instrument of the greatest national good. So I hope that helps you kind of see what Charlotte Mason's aim at history is. Like I said, I'm going to show some of the insight of how I do our history studies in some other videos, but if you are just like can't handle it, I do have a couple on there, but I do roughly follow the ADE schedule. And if you look at my Create Your Own Curriculum plan, I go into more detail about how I choose that and how I've set mine up. And so we follow Charlotte Mason loosely. If you want to follow Charlotte Mason very specifically, Ambleside Online does a great job. I couldn't make Ambleside Online work for my giant family, but I think it's a great resource. And I think big families can do it. It just wasn't working for me. And so I highly encourage you to check those out. Go look around. There are lots of different ways to do this. I think that a lot of the family style Charlotte Masons have her on a kind of 4-year rotation. So you're always going through those time periods. Ambleside Online is on a 6-year rotation, so to speak. So you go through the time periods twice in a school lifetime. And so there's that difference. It's a very much to chew up the meat and spit out the bones kind of situation, because Charlotte Mason is a method, not a legalistic pattern to follow. And so I just want to encourage you, if you are looking for how do I approach history in a Charlotte Mason method, there are great videos, there are great blogs out there, there are great books, but you might consider starting with Charlotte Masons. And this beautiful, beautiful hardback copy is from Living Book Press. Highly recommend them. If you're looking for one where you can take annotations and have room on the side, you can check out Simply Charlotte Mason. Those are great too. This is just a wonderful printing. I absolutely love it. But yeah, you can't beat Charlotte Mason's actual words for knowing how to do things, and to also find some freedom, because some of these curriculums out there are super legalistic. And that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for educating my children in the best way for that child and for our family. And if you read her works, that's what she wants for your children too. She wants you to educate your children in the best way possible for them. She gives you suggestions, because I'm sure she had people knocking on her door. What books are you using? Which one? What grade do you use it for? How do you use this? Just like any of us who put our names out there as homeschoolers, we get the same questions. And so she was getting them. So she name drops a whole bunch of them. This is what I'm using. But if you look through some of the records, they don't necessarily use the same books every year. She was very forward, progressive thinking in the fact that if new information came out, then she used a newer book. I don't think she wants us to only use history books that were published in the early 1900s. That's 100 years ago. There's a lot of history that's happened since then, first of all. And secondly, there's new information about some of that history. And so, she wants us to use that wisdom just as she was when she was trying to find those books for her classrooms. And she wants us as parents to do that. Find the right books, find the good books. It's not an easy task, but you can do it. It just takes time. And a lot of these curriculums have some great work where the moms and the educators already did it for you. But just keep in mind that in the end, it's not about, sorry, I had the idea that it's, they say breast is best when you're breastfeeding a baby, but then there's the fed is best mentality that maybe my kid, maybe I can't breastfeed, maybe those things happen and you have to use formula, because a happy fed child that's healthy is better than one who's starving. Same with the education. A happy learning child is better than one who's just getting by. So let's give our kids the best that we can. And if you have any questions regarding history, either stick around for my following subsequent videos, or go ahead and check it out. Volume 6 talks on it, and also Volume 3 and Volume 1 all touch on that, and you can access them for free on Ambleside Online's website. Thank you for watching, and have a blessed day.